I added a few changes to this project that I submitted about 6 months ago. We've got two buttons in the legend that belongs to the field set. And in the legend, the two buttons are the Save September 2019 and the Allow Editing button. Now, this field set has a brown background, and inside of the field set, we've got a table. Every table row of the table has a table header. The table headers have the tan borders, and the table headers inside of the table rows, inside of the tables, hold a checkbox, a label that belongs to the checkbox, and a text input for you to put a little note. Now, once you check a checkbox, the label that belongs to the checkbox gets a lime green background, and it gets a strike through any text that happens to be on the label. Also, on the right hand side, when you save, you will get a pink background with a blue text color. Now, all this happens with two different functions. When you click the Save button, it's going to execute a save function, but at the end of the save function, it calls the load function. Now, we're using local storage to save these things between our browser sessions. In the save function, it's going to set the fact that you checked a checkbox and the fact that you put some input in a text input to save as a note. So it's going to save those things, and then when it jumps to the load function is going to retrieve those things that you saved. Now there's two things that will cause the load function to fire off. Either the end of the save function, which happens when you click the save button, or when you leave the browser and come back a couple days later, the bodies on load event will call the load function. So anything that you've saved maybe 3 days ago will be saved in the browser, and the browser will retrieve it when your page loads and calls the load function. Okay, once you've saved either a check mark being checked or in some type of note over here to the right, once you've saved it, both the checkbox and the text input elements become disabled. So I can click all I want on the checkbox. I can't toggle from checked to unchecked. And I can click all I want in the text input, but I cannot highlight it and erase it or type over it. Now, this particular one has not been saved, so it is not disabled. It has the toggle back and forth, and you can type stuff in, and you can backspace over it and type something else in. These are both enabled. The only way that you can make any changes to something once it's been saved is to click the Allow Editing button. This will call the Allow Editing function that will give us a variety of prompt, confirm, and alert boxes to contend with. The first thing is asking you, are you sure? And you're offered an OK button and a cancel button to respond. Are you sure you want to edit? If you hit cancel, then you're going to get an alert box here that is basically acknowledging your response. You don't want to edit anything, so we won't. So then in order to leave the alert box, you just click the OK. Now, if you try it again, are you sure? Now, this is the confirm dialog. It gives you two different choices, OK or cancel. This time, if you pick OK, now it's going to give you a prompt dialog, which is going to ask you to type something in here. Please enter your name. And then you see in here like a placeholder that says name, please. So you can type in anything, it doesn't matter, and click OK. Next, it gives you another confirm, no, not a confirm, but a prompt, another prompt. Please enter your code. And so you can just put a code in and click OK. Well, it compared your name and code to two possible name and codes that will work, name and code combinations. That particular name code combination that I put in was not what it was looking for. So we get no changes were made because your name code are not accepted. So you get just a plain old alert box that's giving you some information. You don't have a choice. You don't have to type anything in. You just have to acknowledge that you read the alert and you click out of it. Click allow editing one more time. Are you sure? Yes. Clicking OK with the are you sure? Confirm, OK would give you a value of true. Cancel will give you a value of false. So let's do name please, and I know this one will work. So I put in OK for Lisa. Please enter your code 1234. OK. Now that name code combination matched one of the name code combinations that the code was looking for. So now I can edit anything that was previously saved with the checkboxes disabled. I can make a change if I want to in both the checkbox and the text input over here. So I could back out of it. I can write something else if I want. I can even uncheck this. Whatever I do to either side, when I click save, it will save that fact. Now, this is something new, but now that it's saved and I click and click and click, I can't change it. Not without putting the name code combination again. This, however, if it is not checked when you save it, you still get to toggle it back and forth. So it kind of like this only gets disabled if it was checked and then saved. Otherwise, the functionality is still free for you. And if you don't like it like that, if you want it unchecked and you want it to be stuck unchecked, you just have to maneuver the code so that it will freeze no matter if it's selected or not selected once you hit the save button. But I only have it if it's selected, if it's checked and then saved. I want it to be disabled. So I can allow editing again, and I can get rid of this. Now that there's no value in here at all, when I save it, this color is going to go from pink to white, the original values. Now you may have noticed that the things that we saved over here were red for about a second or two. I believe it's for 2 seconds, and then it turned blue. So if it's save again, red and then blue. When you first click save, it's calling the save function, and it happens so fast. By the time you get to the end of the save function, we have a line of code that immediately, well actually not immediately, but after 1 second, will call the load function. So remember I told you two things will call the load function. One, when you leave a page, and then you turn it on again another time or another day, the body's page load will call the onload function of the page will call load, which will retrieve anything that was saved in local storage. Or when you click this button, the end of the save function will also call load. Either way, when the load function executes, it will turn this text over here blue. The save function turns it red, the load function turns it blue. Let's see what else. This is a field set with a variety of bills, a save button and an editing button, and all of these down here are nothing more than just repeat sets of elements. So this one's for October, this one's for November, and this one's for December, and that wraps up the year. All of my save buttons, save September, October, November, or save December, they all call the save function for every checkbox and every text input, not just the ones that are attached to the field set. It will change everything on the whole page. So if I come up here and I want to say a note and a check box. I don't have to just check this. I can go check any of them. I could check this one and it'll still save that one up top. The buttons are just added to each legend of each failed set for convenience because all of the other ones are out of sight once once you're looking at a different field set, the other buttons are out of sight. Now I could have had my save button and I could have had one save button and one editing button with a fixed position that would not scroll and just set it somewhere at the top of the page or at the bottom of the page. I could have done that and that would have worked just as well too, but that's just not the way I stylized this particular page. Okay, so as you see, even though I clicked the save button way at the bottom, this one is I can't it's disabled. I can't click on it and it's saved and it's got the pink background. I don't think there's anything else. Okay, what else do I want? Besides the functionality of the local storage, I currently have an image, a background image that stretches across the entire browser window. And so it's fixed, and the section in the middle is what does the scrolling, not the background. You have the option of doing this or having an MP4 video run in the background. So we have code, I'll show you the code that lets you stretch out an image of your choice, or if you want to put an MP3 video in the background. And then there's also part of the code that, depending on how wide your window is, if it's above 500 pixels in width, you'll have the MP4 video. If it's more narrow and it's less than 500 pixels in width, it will revert to a still image, because as you can see, when it's this narrow, you can hardly see anything in the background. So a video running would kind of be kind of like a waste of energy, and you wouldn't even be able to really see what's going on anyway. So that will be shown in the code as well. All right. So I think I've explained how all of this works and what types of things I'm going to talk about. So let's just go to the code. It's all in one file. I have my HTML web page code obviously in my HTML file called buildcheckboxes.html, but I also have my CSS styles in this file, and I also have my JavaScript code in this file as well. So it's all in one. So let's open up the head. And the first thing we see in our head, in between the head tags here, is the meta with the name set to viewport and the content set to width equals device width, initial scale equals 1. After that, we have a title that just says build checkboxes. And you see that right here, build checkboxes. Next, we have a link to a tiny image that you can see right next to the title. Link rel equals shortcut icon, href equals me.ico, and type equals image /x icon. The way you can create a tiny ico is you can go into Paint. Where's my paint? Oh, there it is in front of my face. You can hit resize, go to pixels, and make sure you're 50 by 50. You can try 100 by 100, but I'm not sure. You might want to go with 50 by 50 pixels. Okay, and then get a shape. Pick a shape, any shape. Let's go with a heart. And let's make it red. Uh-oh. Let's try it again. Heart. To make it red, I have to hit the paint bucket first. And then let's give it a black background. And that's not the best in the world, but I'm going to go with it. I'm going to save as a bitmap. And I'm going to save it as a 24 bitmap. You can have a 256 color bitmap, a 16. You have JPEGs, GIFs, TIFFs, PNGs, all these. I want to go with the 24-bit bitmap. I'm going to call this heart. And I'm saving it in my folder that I have my project in. And I can change this in this link here to heart.ico. But something happened. I didn't change the bitmap to ICO, but out of curiosity, instead of ICO, it's the right size. Let's see what happens if my link is to heart.bmp. Just out of curiosity. Okay, there's the heart.bmp, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an ICO file. But if it had to be an ICO file, making it that small size and a 24 bitmap, you can just simply, if you wanted to, you could tag on it. You could right click this and rename it and then just take the BMP off and have it heart.ico, and that would work just as well. Okay, so now where was I? So the next thing we have in the head is the style. So the style is in between the style tags. These are all of the styles for the body and the HTML. But first, let me change my language from HTML. Right now the language in Notepad++ is set to HTML, but since I'm looking at CSS now, if I change the language to CSS, it will colorize my code for the CSS. But I gotta go back up. See, it's easier to read that way. Okay, so for the body and the HTML, these are the styles. This line 13, background URL parentheses 117.jpg no repeat center fixed, is what's giving us this snowy background picture. The WebKit background size, Moz background size, O background size, and background size set to cover are just 4 different ways to put the same instruction on there, just in case you're using Firefox one day, Opera another day, Chrome another day, Internet Explorer another day. This will cover all the different possibilities. Next, the ID of wrapper is given a width of 375 pixels and a margin of 0 auto. So you see how wide this is. That is in a wrapper that's 375 pixels. There's a class, and these classes that say full screen BG and full screen BG video, these classes I found on the internet, and they will enable us to have the MP4 video background as a stretched background, just like our still image, and they work. So class full screen -BG has a position set to fixed, the top, right, bottom, and left is 0, overflow is hidden, and z-index is set to -100. There's another one called class full screen -BG double underscore video, and the position is set to absolute, the top and the left are 0, and the width and the height are 100%. Next we have at media, and in parentheses the min aspect ratio is set to 16:9. And then inside of these curly braces we have another a class dot full screen -BG double underscore video, and there's 2 styles inside of that class that is inside of the at media, and that's height set to 300% and top set to -100%. Underneath that is almost a copy and paste, but this time the at media is the max aspect ratio set to 16:9. Again, we're showing the class full screen -BG double underscore video with a width of 300% and a left of -100%. Next we have at media with max width set to 500 pixels. Now this particular style is what is going to allow us to have a video when it's nice and wide, but when it goes under 500 pixels of width, we are going to revert to a still image. So the maximum width being 500 pixels, anything less than that we are going to get class fullscreen-BG to have a background URL of 116.jpg with center / cover no repeat. And 116.jpg happens to be like a fern like looking plant. And after that style, we have the class fullscreen-BG double underscore video set with stylized with display set to none. So that way the video won't display at all, just that image that we put in right here whenever the width gets under 500 pixels. So that was how that particular set of style goes. Now what's next? We have our input with the type of checkbox. We want the checkboxes to be double the size of a normal checkbox, and how we do that is we are going to have 4 different statements that are going to scale to 2. And this again is to make sure, no matter what browser you're using, that you get the styles. So we have MS Transform, Moz Transform, WebKit Transform, and O Transform all set to scale of 2. Padding is set to 10 pixels and margin left is set to 6 pixels. And you can see over here to the right, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, and Chrome, and Opera are what each of those statements we're dealing with. Okay, going further down, we have the input with type set to checkbox plus label. We have a padding left of 4 pixels and a padding right of 4 pixels for those. The next thing we have is class strike through checked plus label. So when you check one of your checkboxes, the label that belongs to it will get a text decoration set to line through and a background color set to lime. Alright, I mentioned field sets. Here are all of the styles for the field sets. There's a float, a background color, a border, and an opacity set. 0.9 means it's hardly see-through. It's got a little twinge of or a little tinge of see-through, but if you wanted to make it more see-through, instead of 0.9 you'd do like 0.5 or something like that. 0.3 would be almost invisible. 1.0 wouldn't be transparent at all. Inside of every field set there is a table, and inside of every table there is a table header. So the table headers have a background color of tan, a border of thick tan ridge, a font size of 15 pixels, and a text align of left. And there are basically 2 buttons in for every field set, and the buttons are housed inside of the legend tags. And here are the styles for the buttons. They have a float of left, a background color set to an RGBA, which is a red, green, blue, alpha, and a background with a linear gradient that starts at the top with light green and gradually turns into green by the bottom of the button, and a padding of 5 pixels. So here you see how the save button and the allow editing button starts light at the top and it gradually gets darker by the bottom. The label, all of these are labels: rent, AEP, Sonata, insurance, cell phones, yada yada yada. They're set to a width of 120 pixels, but if you don't set this line display to inline block, let's misspell this and show you what happens if you don't use line 113. Even though you set the width to 120 pixels, you're going to get whatever width that the text on the inside of the label deems necessary. So you don't actually get to set it to a nice consistent width. So if you want a consistent width for your labels, you must say display is set to inline block. That way your width will work. Okay, so that's it for the style. Let me go back to the language and go back to the HTML so my colors can change, and I can close up my style tags. We don't need to look at the styles anymore. That's all the CSS. And that takes us to the end of the head tag as well, so we can just close the head too. Here's the body. The onload is set to call the load function. Remember, I told you if you leave the web page and go back 3 days later or whatever time you go back, as soon as that page loads, it's going to call the load function. And so if there's anything saved into local storage in that browser, it will fetch all of the things that you saved. Now, this little piece that I commented out, I want to bring it back. Now, now that it's lit up again, it's not commented out. This portion is how we get to change the background color to a video. I mean, not the background color, the background of the browser to a video instead of just a stretched image. So here we have a div with the class set to full screen -bg. That's one of those styles that I found on the internet that will make this work no matter what browser you use. So in between the div with the class set to full screen -bg, we have video tags. And the opening video tag on line 123 has loop, muted, autoplay. Poster is set to an empty string. I guess I could pick an image and stick in there so that while the video is loading, it'll at least show a poster first if it takes a while for the video to load. And it also has a class set to full screen -bg underscore underscore video. That's another one of those styles that we went over in the style tags earlier. So let me see what image I might use as a poster. What images do I have in here? Let's use this fireworks.bmp. Now this is a small file. You see the dimension is only 100 by 92. So when this stretches as a poster, it's going to be a blurry fireworks. But I'm just curious how the poster works. So I'm going to put the fireworks.bitmap in there in the poster. Fireworks.bmp. Just to see if I see it at all. Okay. And then in between the video tags, the opening and closing video tags, we have a source tag. Source src equals, and here we're pointing to my MP4 video. It's July 4th, 2017.mp4, type video /mp4. Ending video tag, ending div. So now that we uncommented this and we lit it all up, it should be ready to execute. Let's see what happens when I refresh the browser. Let's do it again. So for a moment, like a portion of a second, we do see the poster. It's blurry and it's ugly, but we do see it light up real quick. And then we see the MP4. I don't know if I really like seeing that flash. Maybe because it's blurry. Maybe if it was a nice crispy image. Maybe, or if I had some way to control how long the poster stayed lit. But I think I'm going to go back to the poster being set to nothing for now until I find out what other options I have. So actually what you still see the snow background for a second. And that's what I had set the background URL to originally before I uncommented this portion of code out. So what else could I do? Let's go back into the head. I could comment this out. Let's see if this makes a difference. If I comment out this little style. What I'm trying to do is just go straight to the fireworks instead of looking at any still image for a second. Let's see what happens now. Well, we're going to get a flash one way or the other. This is just giving us white. So I guess we can't get around that blink. At least with the code I've got so far, we can't get rid of that blank. All right. Okay, so that was basically how you get a video. Then we have a div with the ID of wrapper that's going to hold all of our field sets. And as you can see, we have 4 field sets, one for September, one for October, one for November, one for December. I'm just going to show you the field set for September, and then you can just copy and paste the entire field set and then just change the names as you need to. So there's an opening field set tag, and there is the legend that belongs to the field set. And instead of words, normally you see a field set, which is just a little box, and the legend is just a little caption. And then whatever you stick in the box in the field set, you've got a caption that gives you like a little tidbit of information to let you know what it's in. But in this case, I'm using a field set and a legend to do this. So it's being a little creative, I guess. In the legend tags, we have 2 buttons. The first button has the on-click event that calls the save function, and on the face of the button it says save September 2019. The button next to it is has the on-click set to call allow editing function, and the face of the button says allow editing. So we'll see the JavaScript functions by the end of this file, because all the JavaScript functions are right before the end of the body. So there's the closing of the legend, and here is the beginning of the table. The table has a bunch of table rows. The first table row is right there. You see it lit up. It has a table header nested inside of the table row. And inside the table header, we have an input with a name set to sep rent, which is short for September rent. The value is set to sep rent also. The class is set to strike through, which is one of the classes that we had in our style tags, and the type is set to checkbox. So this is our checkbox. It's got a class that when we check it, it's going to do something to this label. Now the label is attached to it because it has the keyword for set to match the name and value name. So you have for the checkbox name sep rent, value sep rent, and the label has for sep rent. That attaches it. And on the face of the label, you just have the name of the bill that you're referring to, in this case rent, and then in parentheses I said first so that I am reminded that it is due on the first. After the label, we have a little place to put a note. It's an input with a type of text, and it's got an ID set to 1. There's the end of the table header, the end of the table row, and you can copy and paste this from opening table row to closing table row tag and put in as many table rows as you want for your table. So here's the second one. Table row tags, table header tags, checkbox tags, label for, and input type text. This one has a different name. Each checkbox needs its own name. You don't want to repeat any names. Here's SEP rent, here's SEP AEP, SEP Sun 1, SEP Sun 2, because we make 2 car payments a month, SEP INS for insurance, SEP Cell for the cell phones, SEP Save for the savings, Magic Trick for that payment, SEP Nav for Navient, and however many of these that you want to put in. Just depends on what you're recording. What are you tracking? Okay, so there's that one, and just follow the pattern. That's all you got to do is follow the pattern until you get however many rows you need. And we're almost at the end of this one. Here's the last table row. Nested table header. There's the checkbox, the label for, the input, and again, don't forget that these IDs all have to be unique. The IDs It's good to put them in order. This is ID 6, ID 7, but we jumped to ID 29 here because I added two more rows to every table inside of every field set. And I just had to make sure that even if this wasn't 8, because 8 was already given to a different part of my code, that I went to the highest ID and then just I picked up where I left off so that they all had their unique ID and that it was exactly the number of IDs that I was using for my particular web page. All right, so there is the end of the table and the end of the field set. And you could just create one field set and then take the whole field set and copy and paste it and then just change these names so that nothing is a repeat. That's all you got to do. So this one is for October, this one's for November, this one's for December. This is the end of the div that belongs to the ID of wrapper, which is really the whole page. Now let's look at the JavaScript. We start off creating some variables. So here we create a variable called I, and we use our I as a counter. Then we take this one, var checkboxes equals document.querySelector all, and in parentheses and single quotes we have input square brackets type equals checkbox. And var text boxes equals document.querySelector all, parentheses and quotes input type equals text. So basically this, we're going to loop through all of the checkboxes on the page, no matter which field set and table it's in. They're counting all of them on the whole page. And then we're also going to loop through all of the text inputs on the page as well. And we're going to use the variable named checkboxes to refer to one of all of the checkboxes and one of all of the text boxes. We refer to the checkboxes with checkboxes square brackets I, and we refer to the text boxes with get element by ID parentheses I, because we're using an ID for the text boxes, and we are using for the checkboxes, it's more like an array of checkboxes. That's why we use the square brackets, because it's like checkboxes index 1, checkboxes index 2, and so on and so forth until we loop through them all. So let's first look at our save function. We have a save function, we've got a load function, and we've got an allow editing function. The save function is what happens when we click our save button. So first let's loop through all of the text inputs. The text inputs are all of these things over here on the right that you can save a note. For I equals 1, I less than text boxes dot length I plus plus. Var value equals document dot get element by ID parentheses I dot value. This line 431 is how we are going to set what we put in our note into our browser's local storage. Local storage dot set item, and then in parentheses key plus I comma value. Then we're going to use an if condition to do some things. We're going to loop through all of these text inputs, and if there happens to be a value in there that we set, we're going to turn it red. So document.getElementById parentheses I.style.color equals red will do that. If, as we're iterating through all of these text inputs, some of them don't have a value in there because we didn't type anything in there, then we're going to jump down to this else, and we've got two statements that might not make sense right now, but I'll explain them. If there's no information in there, then document.getElementById parentheses I.disabled equals false, because we do not want it to be disabled, and document.getElementById parentheses I.style.background color equals white, because we want it to be the default white background color. And you'll see that when we get into the load, when things change colors, background colors, and things become disabled, when it is saved and then loaded, basically retrieved, because when we're in the load function, we're retrieving the things that we've saved. If we have the opportunity to edit those things, we want to make sure that we do not keep the checkbox disabled so that we can't toggle, and we want to make sure that we don't keep the background color to pink. If there's nothing in there, we want it to revert to the default white color. That might make more sense when I get through all of the code and then run it again. But anyway, there's the end of the if and the end of the for loop. So let's do a similar looping for our checkboxes. For I equals 0, I less than checkboxes dot length I plus plus, local storage dot set item, because again we're still in the save function and we want to set whether we have our checkbox checked or not. So we use local storage dot set item parentheses checkboxes. Again, we're using the square brackets, so it's as if checkboxes is an array. So this would be like checkboxes array I. Index I, I'm sorry, checkboxes index I dot value, comma checkboxes index I dot checked. Because I starts off at 0, checks the first checkbox, and sets it if it's checked or not. So there's the end of that for loop. Now, we're coming on to the end of the save function, which is right here on line 449, but we have one last line of code here, and this is going to automatically call the load function. Remember, I told you there's 2 times the load function gets called. One, when your page first loads to double check the browser and see if there's been anything saved in local storage, and when you first save the stuff by clicking the save button and calling the save function. Right here, this line of code is what's going to call the load function immediately after it gets to this line. So we have var timer equals set timeout, and in parentheses the name of the function that we're going to call, which is load, and it's in single quotes, comma 1000, which represents milliseconds. So this is basically saying call the load function in 1 second. So 1 second comes, and then it immediately comes down here and calls the load function. So let's take a look at the load function, but let's close the save function first. Let's close it. Let's look at the load function, and we're going to do for loops again. So let's loop through the checkboxes first. For I equals 0, I less than checkboxes dot length I plus plus. And this statement is kind of long, but make sure that you type it correctly, exactly the way you see it. Checkboxes index I dot checked equals local storage dot get item parentheses checkboxes index I dot value triple equals true in quotes question mark true colon false. Now the next if condition here is what we're using to disable the checkbox after it's been stored. So we're storing it when we run the save function. We're storing it when we run the load function. We're retrieving it, but we want to determine if a checkbox is checked. We want to disable it so that when the user opens the browser again or refreshes the page after they've saved it, that they can't edit it. So this is going to stop them from being able to edit it once it's been saved. So if checkboxes index I dot checked, if that's true, that's just basically wanting to know, is the checkbox checked? If yes, then checkboxes index I dot disabled equals true. So for every checkbox that is checked and saved, it will be disabled, so you can't toggle it anymore. There is the closing of that if, and this is the end of the checkboxes loop for loop. Now let's do the same thing for the text boxes, the text inputs. for I equals 1, I less than text boxes dot length, I plus plus, var stored value equals local storage dot get item, because remember in the load function we're using local storage dot get item to retrieve that which has been saved from the save function. So var stored value equals local storage dot get item, and in parentheses we have key in quotes plus I. Now we're going to ask a question here. If there's a stored value, because we're in the load function, we're retrieving, so we want to know, we're looping through every single text input to see what has a saved value and what doesn't. So if there's a stored value, we're going to do a few things. If it's true, we're going to say document.getElement by ID parentheses I.value equals stored value. Then we have document.getElement by ID parentheses I.style.color equals blue. So we've determined that it's stored. We're making sure that its value is the same thing as whatever the stored value was. We're turning it blue, and then we're also turning the background color to pink with document.getElement by ID parentheses I.style.background color pink. After that, we are going to use this statement to disable it so that it cannot be edited once it's saved. Document.getElement by ID parentheses I.disabled equals true. Here's the end of the if and the end of the text boxes loop. And while we're at it, it's the end of the load function. Okay, so again, the save function is setting things that you want to save. The load function is retrieving or getting the things that you've saved. And this function, the allow editing, is going to put you through a process to determine if you're allowed to make an edit or not. So the function is called allow editing, and we are going to use, as you can see here, we're using a confirm pop-up box. Here we're using a prompt pop-up box, and here we're using an alert pop-up box. So this example is going to show you the difference between 3 different pop-up boxes. The first one is the confirm. So we have var choice equals confirm. Are you sure? The confirm pop-up is going to give you 2 choices to make. And if you say OK, that means true. If you say cancel, that means false. So after you answer this confirm pop-up, either true or false is going to be in this variable called choice. It's either going to have the value of true or false. So then we're going to get down to the next line of code, which is going to question, is it true or is it false? If the choice is true, and also double check and pay attention to, here we have a single equals, which means assignment. Here we have a double equals, which is testing for truthiness. And here we have a triple equals, which is, let's see, I'm not sure exactly how to explain the difference between the double equals and the triple equals in JavaScript. Just go ahead and Google that so that you can have a clear understanding of that difference. Because I know there's a slight difference between the double equals and the triple. But I know that the single equals is just assigning a value on the right to a variable on the left. So anyway, if you choose OK, which means the choice is equal to true, then you're going to get a prompt, and a prompt is different than a confirm. A prompt pop-up is going to let you actually type some stuff in there as well. So the prompt pop-up is going to say, please enter your name, and in the place where you can actually type, you're going to see this name please, kind of like a placeholder that you can type over top of and start typing in. Whatever value you type in that prompt pop-up is going to be placed as the value for this variable called person. After you do that, you're going to get another prompt pop-up it's going to say please enter your code, and where you type there's going to be a placeholder that says code please. So then whatever you type in there for your code is going to go inside of this variable called code. Now when you have a value for person and a value for code, you're going to get down to this if condition that's going to compare what you typed and what they want to see. So if person triple equals Lisa and code triple equals 1, 2, 3, 4, which means you have to have both Lisa as the person and code is 1, 2, 3, 4. If that whole thing is true, or person can also equal Freeman and code can also equal Woodson. So it either has to be Lisa followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, or Freeman followed by Woodson. Those are the only two possibilities that this particular code is going to allow you to continue with. If you get either one of those right, then the name code password will be accepted and we will enable the checkboxes and the text inputs for editing. We will enable them. So in order to enable them, we have to loop through them all over again and take their disabled status and make it false. So if you say disabled equals false, it means the same thing as enabled equals true. So this is the one for the checkboxes. For I equals 0, I less than checkboxes dot length, I plus plus, checkboxes index I dot disabled equals false. There's the closure of the for loop for that. We also want to enable the text box inputs again as well. So for I equals 1, I less than text boxes dot length, I plus plus, document dot get element by ID parentheses I dot disabled equals false. So we have enabled both the text boxes and the check boxes for editing purposes. Here is the end of the if condition that if you tried on line 482 right here, when it's comparing your person and code values, if you were not correct and this condition was false, then you have to go all the way down to the else and ignore these for loops which enable the checkboxes and text boxes. You have to ignore that because you didn't pass the if test, and so you have to go else. Now you get the alert box, which is nothing more than information popping up to you, and the only way you can get rid of it is by clicking the OK, just to confirm that you read it. So you get the name and the code wrong. You get else alert, no changes were made because your name and code are not accepted. Now that's the inner if. The outer if was right here on line 478, and this wanted to know if your choice was true when the first confirm box asked you if you're sure as far as wanting to edit. So if you said cancel, you changed your mind, you don't want to make an edit, then that meant that this right here, choice equals true, is a false statement. So everything that's inside of here all the way to the outer else gets ignored, and then you get here else alert, you don't want to edit anything, so we won't. So here is the ending curly brace of the allow editing function. This remove my stuff is not being used here. Here's the ending script tag, the ending body tag, and the ending HTML. Okay, so with that being said, I've showed you all of the code to how this works, and one more quick run through. I'll just go out of this month and I'll go into December. I can say paid in full for next year. How nice would that be, right? And I'm going to save it. Okay, so we went through the save function, which turned this to red. Then we went to the load function, which checked if there was something saved in there, and then it gave the background pink. It made the color of the text blue. We saved the fact that this is checked and this is disabled, so we can't toggle the checkbox, and this is disabled, so we can't change anything in here. The only way we can change any of this is to hit the allow editing button. But before I do that, I want to show you how I can leave and I can come back another time. And what I just did in December will stay because it is saved in local storage. And the only way I can change this now or next Tuesday is by going through the allow editing process with all three of these different pop-ups. And if we cancel, it means you don't want to edit anything, so we won't. And if I try it again, are you sure? And I give a messed up name and a messed up code, then no changes were made because your name code are not accepted. Try it one more time. Are you sure? Yes. Give it what it wants, the correct parameters that it's looking for, and now I have the ability to make my edits. So I can go, oh, that it's ludicrous. I have not paid in full for the whole next year. That was just me being silly. And now I have to save it. And now I'm back to my original thing that I can select any of these um, as long as I make my changes before I click save. Once I click save, it's locked into my local storage.